Welcome back to the Wife of Violence podcast, where we dive deep into topics of personal growth, passion, and leadership, all with violence on our mind. I'm Amber, I'm the wife.
I am Ryan, I am the violence.
Indeed. And this morning we both woke up and chose violence.
Every day.
And kept choosing it. It's like working out. You have to keep making the choice.
That's all I know.
On this episode, we are striking a nerve as we fight above our weight class to understand pain as a tool for growth. Ready to get into it?
Sounds fantastic.
It
sounds right up my alley.
I think you're going to love it. As a side note, I accidentally told Ryan earlier the topic of this podcast was using pain as a tool for growth. Very different and also somehow very the same.
Yeah, literally, 5 minutes before we started, I was like, hey, what are we talking about? And you were like, you're going to really like it, but I don't remember what it is right now. And then 2 minutes later, she spouted off this thing and I was like, sweet.
I have changed it for the official launch here, but we'll see what happens. I'm just saying. So I'm going to get us started with a story that I first found in a book by Nassim Taleb titled Anti-Fragile. Amazing book title. Amazing concept, truthfully. And in the section I'm referring to, he's giving examples of what is essentially proof that we know challenges make us better. So I'm about to knock out all the cliches that I can here. He references the pop culture saying of it builds character, or whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger. He references a Latin saying, sophistication is born out of hunger. A classical literature reference, difficulty is what wakes up the genius. And of course, some current classics such as When Life Gives You Lemons and Necessity is the Mother of Invention. So basically everyone from ancient Greeks to your great-grandmother to our current modern day philosophers such as the great Taylor Swift and Eminem acknowledge this idea. And then he connects it to a recent phenomenon seen in the aeronautics world where the automation of planes was actually causing flying accidents and deaths. Essentially, pilots were too comfortable. It reduced their attention and it reduced their skill sets. So I dug a little deeper into this idea, and it was due in part to an FAA regulation that forced an increased reliance on automation. And what I found was a research article from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University published in 2020 that tied all of this together as it's the pilot's duty to decide when to engage and disengage the automation. But the pilots didn't have the experience and to evaluate the scenarios and the information that they're getting to make those decisions. So not to steal too much of the violent side from you, but this is a great spot to start because we see the similar effect in de-escalation tactics. If you want to be great at avoiding fights, you've got to be great at fighting.
Yes. Yeah. That's a common thing that we talk about. I wholeheartedly believe that if you are going to be good at de-escalating a confrontation, at negotiating a potentially violent situation, you need to be able to handle yourself physically. I think it's not impossible. There are people that are just, gifted with gab and the ability to talk their way out of situations. But I think if you know that you can handle yourself physically, then you are much more comfortable having a conversation and being able to control your own emotions without escalating things through your voice and your body language and whatever else, making the other person more nervous and more likely to get violent.
That brings us around to this idea of the fear of failing, that our self-invoked suffering almost is this idea that if something goes wrong, if something goes bad, everything is going to be terrible. It's going to be horrible. I'm not going to be able to go with it. And that makes it harder to deal with something on the front end. So if you have to be ready, obviously, to succeed. And I'm going to move out back from the violence side of it. But if that doesn't work, we've talked about it before, your second plan A, or landing where you are and being ready to go again, rather than letting it completely count you out.
Yeah, I think if you go into a situation with this mindset that I cannot fail, one, failure is the most likely option. It's the most readily available option. I think Chael Sonnen said something similar to this years ago. It is the most readily available. It is the most probable option. It just is. Whether we're talking about starting a new job or a new business or going to school or whatever, it's the easiest thing to do. So when you start saying, well, failure is not an option. Well, that's just BS. It's just not true. And then the flip side of that is if you go into it thinking that you're going to fail, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So finding that balance between understanding that failure is highly likely, but that not succumbing to the idea that it's self-fulfilling. Why am I doing it if I'm not trying to succeed, if I'm not trying to get better?
The stress of invoking this idea that if I fail, like that's it, I think has a lot to do with it too. And I referenced suffering. So there's this difference between pain and suffering in most cases. Not all that, we're talking more than just like a physical pain, but it goes to the Buddha saying about getting hit by two arrows. The first arrow hits you, do you feel pain? The second arrow hits you, do you feel pain? But what he references as the second arrow is the meaning you attribute to the first.
Yeah.
And so when you're stressed and afraid of failure and evoking that as suffering, so I'm let's take it to violence for a second. I'm scared that if I try to hit this takedown and I don't hit it, I'm going to end up in a really bad position. And so I let that weigh on me and take away from my ability to actually execute it. We end up with this self-fulfilling prophecy. And I'm not ready to fail and go again.
And the truth is, you probably won't even attempt the takedown.
Right.
If you're so caught up in, if I do this, then this might happen, and this might happen, and this might happen, then you probably won't do it at all. We talk in our circles a lot about if you're not failing, you're not really training. And the idea that if I'm not being challenged, if I'm not working with people that are going to make me uncomfortable, I think make me a little bit afraid. I think, look, fear exists for a reason. It's a thing that is a survival mechanism for us. But it also can force us into places that maybe we otherwise wouldn't go, and so the idea that if I'm always winning, if I'm rolling and I'm always tapping everybody that I roll with, or I'm always winning and sparring or whatever, I'm probably not growing. I'm probably doing the things that I'm really good at and really comfortable with. And I'm not working with somebody that's going to push me either because I'm afraid to fail, or I have this kind of preconceived notion that there's no coming back from that failure. Because I'm going to see this person again next week or tomorrow or whatever it is.
I think it was Darren Hardy that I heard this from first, where once I started looking at emotions as a signal more so than just being in the feeling itself, a lot of things changed for me. So if I walk outside and it's cold, I know to go get a jacket. I react to that stimulus.
Right.
If I'm afraid, a lot of times people stay stuck in that state of just, okay, I'm afraid, and don't realize, okay, let me use this to get to the next thing. And it's referenced by Seth Godin, and I know it's in his book, Lynchpin. I'm sure he talks about it in many places. Discomfort means you're doing something that others were unlikely to do because they're hiding out in the comfortable zone.
Yeah. We growth is in discomfort is a common refrain in our centers. And we've built entire programs and weekends around that idea. And it is, look, nobody wants to be uncomfortable. Like there's a cognitive dissonance there that we as humans, look around, as humans, we do everything we can to make our lives as comfortable and pain-free as possible. Any sort of adversity whatsoever, any sort of challenge whatsoever, let's make a machine for that, or take a drug for this, or whatever it is. You can go to Walmart right now, and they have that little section where it's like all the as seen on TV stuff, and you can get like a thing to help you open jars of pickles. Like, hey man, just get stronger. And I'm not saying like, I know that, you may have issues with, arthritis, whatever. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about at every turn, humans do everything they can to make things as simple and easy and pain-free as possible. And I think the longer term systemic effect of that is when adversity hits, we don't know how to deal with it. We don't know how to push back against that. And so we acquiesce because we're afraid of the pain. We're afraid of the discomfort that comes with that adversity.
We are moving into. Ryan didn't know he opened this door, but he put it wide open. So here we go.
I knew it because I could see her.
You could see me get smiling.
Like her face tells me everything. Like she can't hide.
For those of you not watching, grab a platform when you're done driving. Check out Spotify or YouTube or something, and you too will be able to read my face. I have no poker face whatsoever. But we've moved to the hedonist versus Nietzsche ways of thinking. So a hedonist is likely to say the pursuit of pleasure is the most important thing in life, versus Nietzsche, who says to live is to suffer and to survive is to find some meaning in the suffering.
Yes.
I don't think I have to tell people that we lean more towards Team Nietzsche on this one.
I mean, I think there's something to be said for both, right?
Mm-hmm.
I do think that the hedonist kind of approach tends to lead towards more short-term gratification and maybe ignores long-term ramifications. Mm-hmm. It's a more, and again, like I do think as humans we've gone more this way, where we are willing to maybe sacrifice or just ignore altogether long-term gains or long-term consequences for that short-term gratification, because again, it's pleasure. Like I enjoy it more for now, and it's like a puppy or a toddler or whatever. They're not thinking about tomorrow or 10 days from now or 4 months from now. They're not thinking about 5 minutes from now. And it's very easy for adult humans to get caught up in that as well. So I do think there's, people are generally motivated by pleasure or pain, right? And that's what both of these ideas, philosophies are talking about. And I think there's something to be said for both of them. However, one is very short-sighted in most cases, I think.
Well, in the long-term side of what Nietzsche is saying isn't we're all suffering and just hanging on by a thread to get through it. It's that because we have to look for something to value, it's not so much what we decide what that is, whether it's family or your future aspirations for your business or your wellness. It's the willingness, the act of valuing something itself that helps push you. So rather than just pursuing pleasure as the thing, you have something that you're focused on and you're able to help motivate and encourage yourself because you have something that you value to keep working towards.
Yeah.
Have you heard of iatrogenics?
I don't think so.
I just learned about it. Okay. Again, anti-fragile. So it's a medical term, and apologies to all the medical personnel if I get this wrong. It's when a treatment causes more harm than benefit. So they intended to do something good and it ends up having a harmful side effect. Okay. And it's interesting because as far as we know, there's no word for the opposite. When you're trying to cause harm, but it ends up creating good. And that's where the anti-fragile idea comes in, this ironic twist where you're trying to kill this plant by watering it with bleach or something, and it ends up thriving from that, because there's that backfire. The best examples, of course, that I could really find of this are in cartoons, like Daffy Duck and Bugs or Wile E. Coyote chasing the Roadrunner. And a lot of times there are races or something that they're trying to compete in. And let's say Daffy is trying to sabotage Bugs Bunny, and it always ends up helping Bugs get further along. Daffy Duck is racing Bugs. He gets ahead, tries to do something to make it impossible for Bugs to catch up, ends up letting Bugs pass him, that kind of thing. But I don't have a word for that.
I think it's they tried to bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed kind of thing.
We have a word for that. We have a whole phrase, a shirt, everything.
It's like, I'm gonna cover this up. I'm gonna throw some dirt on it. I'm gonna push them down. I'm gonna suppress them, whatever. And depending on who the them is, that may be the kind of pain, the kind of discomfort, the kind of motivation that pushes them to whatever that next level is. And there are people that thrive on that. I mean, there are people that obviously,
The anti-fragile.
A phrase in fighting sometimes is that cookie will crumble. Like a little bit of pressure put on that person, I know they're going to crumble. I know they're going to fall apart. I know that first hint of a hard shot to the body or whatever, they're gonna determine it's not worth it. So that cookie will crumble. But then there are other people that are like, you can see it. Maybe there's a little smile on their face. Maybe they take that deep breath and their hands come up just a little bit more, or they change. Whatever it is, they look for that sort of challenge, that sort of adversity. That's the thing that gets them to the next stage of whatever it is that they're working on. They are motivated by the challenge, the discomfort, we can say pain. I mean, there's something to that, right? I mean, you go lift weights. If you lift weights and 2 days later you're not feeling it, if you know what you're doing, you're wondering, well, did I work hard enough that day?
Yeah.
If there's no soreness, if there's no stiffness, if there's no pain, right? And pain in the right way, obviously.
Yeah.
You're wondering, okay, well, did I push myself enough to tear muscle fibers, so that then they can rebuild and I become bigger and stronger in these things? And it's easier to, I think, quantify it in that way. A lot of times, that if you go to the gym, you bench press, 2 days later, you're really sore. Okay, I tore some muscle fibers. I know that there's going to be a benefit to that. In life, it's harder to see sometimes because it's pain, and maybe I recognize the growth a year later, 2 years later. It's like being a business owner is sometimes the idea. I mean, you hear all the time. Well, if you can make it through the first year. Do you know how long a year is of paying rent and worrying about paying employees and making all the utility bills and that kind of thing? A year is an eternity. And then it's kind of an arbitrary thing. It's like, I think it's the thing that entrepreneurs tell themselves to make them feel better. It's like
kind of like when it rains on your wedding day, it's good luck.
Yeah. Like I have a thing to look forward to.
Yeah.
But a year's a long time.
Yeah. So you brought up weightlifting, a pain that we put upon ourselves, for lack of a better way to explain it, and then life or business, maybe business, where experiences happen to us and we have to react to those. And there's a lot of emphasis put on post-traumatic stress disorder or PTSD, but not a lot of emphasis that I've seen, at least in just common everyday conversations, put on PTG, post-traumatic growth.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I don't want to go too far into this because I'm going to nerd out about it, but I tried to look up articles and peer-reviewed articles on post-traumatic growth, and there's a lot of debate about the right way to judge it because it's hard, it's so qualitative, it's people talking about their values before and how they grow after, and there's.
I think you should explain what that is.
I'm gonna get there,
Okay.
Or maybe I'll start there now. But post-traumatic stress disorder, everybody just seems to say, okay, well, you're having flashbacks and these responses, and you're acting this way, and you weren't doing that before the event, and we accept it and we move on, and we're like, all right, let's fix this, let's add medication to it, that kind of thing. And then for post-traumatic growth, all those articles aren't out there about, yes, let's study this, let's see how this works. It's more like, well, is it actually there? But one of the articles I did find references a study done by Judith Neal, a psychologist, who studied 40 people who went through post-traumatic growth after life events. And I think the phases that I'm about to spell out will help define the term for anyone who's not sure what it is. So most of them experienced some kind of dark night where all of their previous values were thrown into question. Their life seemed possibly even meaningless, and they had this really dark time. And after this, they went through a phase of spiritual searching. And these are her terms, or at least the terms referenced here, where they tried to make sense of what happened to them and find new values. And then the final phase is a spiritual integration where they apply their new principles and found meaning and purpose in their life with the gratitude of being alive, and even some gratitude for having been through the traumatic event. So this suffering that they went through led to a rebirth of a new level of awareness. And that calls back to Nietzsche, where he looked at suffering as this ultimate emancipation of the spirit. Like, we need suffering. It's part of surviving to suffer and to overcome it. And so that's what post-traumatic growth essentially looks like. Going through an event, and probably there is a point of it being PTSD before we grow through into PTG. Not a psychologist, not any kind of medical personnel to make those types of claims, but on the other side, ultimately, they end up growing and using their traumatic event to restructure their values and find new meaning.
Yeah. I have a bit of a story with this. My entire academic career, I was deathly afraid of public speaking, like to the point where in junior high and high school, I would do everything I could to just avoid it altogether. I would figure out little ways to work around it. When I went to college, I had a public speaking class. I went every day until it was time to go give my first speech, and I never went back. Literally just was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. And so after college, which I didn't finish, but after college, I started taking martial arts classes, and it was something that I'd want to do my whole life. I started in this kind of late compared to most people in positions similar to ours. And so I started taking martial arts classes, and I think I had an aptitude for it. I don't know if I had an aptitude for it or it's just something that I really enjoyed, and so I worked really hard at it, or maybe some combination of the two. I don't know. So one day, I'd been there for a couple of years, and one day the instructor wasn't going to be there on time. He was running late, whatever. And his wife worked at the front, and she comes to me and she's like, "Hey, we'll call him Ben. Ben is running late. He needs you to start class." And I thought, where's the back door? And I mean, this is a place that, I'd been going there for years. I was very confident in my abilities. I was going to be standing in front of people that I knew well and whatever. And so I did it because I felt like I owed it to the people that were out there waiting for a class. And I ended up not just doing the warm-up, I ended up doing the whole class because he ended up, I don't remember what the issue was, but he couldn't get there. And that was like, I mean, I'm not going to say it was like an immediate like rebirth. All of a sudden I am cured of public speaking. Like, I still have issues every now and then when I'm getting in front of people. But when I tell you I was deathly afraid of it, that's exactly what I mean. And after being forced into a situation, not forced, I could have left. I could have been like, no, I'm not doing that, whatever. Being put in a position where I needed to step up and I needed to do this, the effect of that afterwards was I essentially found my calling, I think, and it led to, I mean, even this, what we're doing right now, this podcast where we're sitting at our kitchen table, there's nobody around, whatever, I would have never done anything like this. So it extended beyond just standing in front of a group of people. I did not want to talk and have people listen, and I still wonder why people listen to this day. Like, that part still confuses me, but, so I get this idea of post-traumatic growth because I think that's what got me to, a large part of what got me to where I am now.
Do you remember what you were supposed to talk about for that first speech?
Oh, I have no idea.
I imagine it wasn't something you were passionate about.
No, almost for sure. Go ahead.
School in general, like, I didn't...
Don't get me started. This is a whole other podcast that I could do a whole, like, month on?
I thought I didn't like reading. I wasn't a reader until the right book was put into my hands.
Yes.
You know, I thought I didn't enjoy history until history was presented in the right way to me.
Right.
That I could internalize it and remember it, not just forcing it into my brain.
Well, and that's, I mean, if we go back to pain and pleasure for a minute, from a coaching perspective, a teaching perspective, a student perspective, it's very easy to attach yourself to the pain part, to the pleasure part, because it takes no real effort. As a coach, a really good coach, a really good instructor, a really good professor, a really good teacher, whatever, needs to be able to take people through that discomfort and let them understand why they're going to be better for it on the other side. It's what really makes a good coach or a good teacher. The other is easy. Like you don't need a coach for the other. Like you want to run to that. You want to run to the hedonistic side of things. As humans, not just humans, any living species for the most part is looking for the path of least resistance, the thing that's going to make them feel better right now. And a coach, a teacher, an instructor, whatever, that's good can put you on the path of understanding why this discomfort right now, and maybe tomorrow and the next day and the next day after that, is going to make you better in the long run. And I had some great teachers coming up, and if I had more teachers like that, I probably would have been more inclined to be a better student.
Teachers make a difference.
Yeah, for sure.
And so the path I want to take us down in this notion is a division of, I'm going to say pain, just as a common term, between two categories, giving you 4 types of pain, where it's deserved or undeserved. And then the second set being accepted or unaccepted. And it doesn't so much matter whether your pain is deserved or undeserved. So I'm rolling and I give you a triangle and I wasn't even paying attention. And there's
me a triangle.
Pretend I accidentally do something that puts me in a triangle. And I'm like, yeah, I made a mistake. That was stupid. That was deserved. And now the question is whether I accept it or I don't accept it, which I guess in the way I explained that, I accepted it. But you can also think, you were just big and strong and you forced that on me.
Right.
And so it's whether you accept the pain or not that is the trigger for whether you can grow through it, whether you can continue on through that and understand that was your growth, you're growing.
Right. Because otherwise there's no lesson there.
Right.
The lesson is I'm not willing to take responsibility for my actions that led me to this place. And instead of me saying, hey, what was it that I did, or what did you see, or what am I doing that is putting me in a position to be triangled? Mm-hmm. I'm acquiescing myself with all responsibility and saying, you got lucky, or well, it's just because you're big and strong, or whatever it is. Or, in life, you hear things like this all the time. Well, he's that because his dad's this, or, she's that way because she's got this money, whatever. And there's something to that for sure. Right. on some levels. But it's like when people say, well, take Michael Jordan. And I think I've already used Michael Jordan before, but well, he's a great athlete. Yes. But that's not enough.
Yeah.
You know how many great athletes exist on the planet? Mm-hmm. How many great minds exist on the planet? It's the people that push themselves, that challenge themselves, that go through these days where they don't want to get up at 6 a.m. and do road work and then lift and then have somebody take them through the fundamentals of free throws or whatever it is, for the 1,000th time. Those are the people that, even if they have good athletic attributes, they understand that that's not going to get them to the next level. They're going to have to get uncomfortable. If they're going to see any kind of growth, they're going to get better. Now, if you're comfortable with where you are, and I would maintain that comfortability is a dangerous place to be, depending on what we're talking about. But if you're comfortable I'm not judging that. I'm just saying, because somebody else is doing better than you or performing at a higher level or whatever, that's probably more about you than it is about them.
This idea of responsibility I use, each month I do a theme with my youth martial arts class that I teach. And I try to give some kind of lesson discussion that will really make it hit home with them. And so one of the months we look at responsibility, and I bring them all in near the end of class, and I tell them the story. I'm walking through the hallway. I have a cup of coffee in my hand. Someone bumps into me and spills the coffee out and all over me. And the first thing I ask them is, who's responsible? And the majority of the answers, unless they've been in the class before for this rotation, are, well, the person who bumped into you. And I'm like, that is one way to look at it. And I could put it on that person and curse their name all day and walk around with a coffee stain and think of them every time I look down or in a mirror. The other way is to put more of the responsibility on me. And I ask them, what are some things I could have done to not end up with coffee spilled all over me? And they say things like, you could have had a cup with a lid on it. You could have put less coffee in the cup. You could have stayed further away from them in the hallway. And I'm like, yes, so these are things I can take responsibility of and I can change. If I put it on the other person bumping into me in the hallway, I can't change that. I have no control over that. I just gave them that control of whether coffee is spilled on me or not.
Right. And that idea of that personal responsibility and being able to control the variables that I can control comes, that was the whole genesis for the Hard Ready program. The idea that this emotional toughness that we're going to build through tough physical challenges and kind of attacking things that we do habitually, that we feel like we have an attachment to, that maybe we don't necessarily need, but they've become such a piece of who we are and what we do that it's hard to let go of it. And the extension of that being, if I can't take accountability for myself, if I can't control my own emotions, if I can't control what's going on inside of me, then it's impossible to control any kind of external variables whatsoever. And so that whole idea of, well, if I'm going to improve, if I'm going to get better, I have to recognize that that's wholly my responsibility. Like nobody can do that for me. And for me to do it, I'm going to have to get uncomfortable. First, I'm going to have to acknowledge that I'm not the best me I can be.
Yeah.
And that right there,
that's a lot.
Yeah. Whether we're talking about at work, as in family, in relationships, in martial art, whatever it is, just acknowledging on the front end, hey, I could be better, that I'm not performing at what I know I could perform at. That's a lot right there. And then recognizing, okay, I'm not, I would like to be, man, I'm going to have to do hard stuff to get there.
Yeah. And it's there's almost a duality to it. We need to recognize that we're not great, but we have the ability to be great. And I'm going to tie this back to a Greek philosopher, because why not? We've been all over the place so far. Heraclitus said, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river, and he's not the same man. Or maybe at least you hope not, right? We should be evolving and changing, just like the river is flowing and it's different. But he puts in mind, again, this unity of opposites. If I want to be awake, at some point I'm asleep. So they're different, but they're connected.
Yeah. I think this idea of we're in a political season right now, and you see this on social media where somebody will say, yeah, but 6 years ago you said this. Okay, but I was a different person 6 years ago, and if you're not, I feel sorry for you. Like I'm 50. Jeez, that hurt a little bit. I'm not the same person I was 5 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. I am certainly not the same person I was at 20 or 25. And if you are, I would contend that you have wasted a lot of life. It's easy. again, it's easy to affix to a position, keep that position, whatever it is, whether it's politics or theology or whatever, it doesn't matter. It's easy to affix to that position, hold tightly to it, tout whatever party lines you want, run to your corner and defend your side, throw your jersey on, whatever, and defend your side, because it doesn't require you to think. It doesn't require you to get uncomfortable and
push
and
yourself.
Yes, it doesn't require me to question myself and think, man, was I wrong? Because, dude,
So what if we're wrong?
Because now what? Well, now if I'm wrong, if I recognize that I'm wrong, what do I do with that information?
And if you're afraid of that and you let it just beat you down, you'll have a crisis that you don't come out of.
Yes.
Versus realizing you can accept it and go from there.
Right. Because what's the worst thing that's going to happen?
Yeah.
You know, it's like if we tie it back to sparring or jiu-jitsu or whatever, what's the worst thing that happens if I tap? We touch hands and we go again, right? Like
maybe you lose a medal, like you'll still be okay.
But if I'm smart about it, I'll learn a lesson.
Mm-hmm.
I'll learn to maybe not do the thing that I did that got me tapped in the first place. But if I don't acknowledge it,
if I don't take the control and responsibility.
Yes, I will definitely do that thing again, and I will definitely tap to that thing again. And so the idea that I'm not going to change, I'm not going to improve because this is my position, and that's it. You know, you're not gonna force me to acknowledge that I might be wrong, or that I made a mistake that got me tapped. Then okay, that's fine. But there's no growth to be had there.
Yeah, I don't know if I've told you this story, but I was 21. I had just moved to Charlotte and started my real job, got my dog, because let's be honest, that was first on my list of adulting. And this was pre getting back into training, I spent 3 hours a night at a dog park, pretty much. And those were my people, those were my friends, we hung out, the dogs ran around, yeah. Anyway, I met, again, 21, I met an Army veteran. He had a little lassie dog. What are they called?
Collie.
Yeah, collie. He had a collie. Gorgeous dog, of course, as they all are. He told me that at some point, I'm going to change everything I believe, religious, spiritual, political. And of course, I'm being nice and I'm nodding along. Okay, old man, like, sure, whatever. And I had actually been through, let's call it a religious awakening of my own. I had changed some values over the course of college. But I was like, there's no way some of these other things I believe could change. Like there's no way my political beliefs could change. And I'm not getting into that on here, but they did. And I think back to that man and I'm like, geez, I should go try to find him and tell him he was right. I mean, he knows he was right. It's just, it's crazy.
Yes. But I think, again, like...
That's growth, though. I mean, they changed because I challenged myself.
Yes. It's easy to surround yourself with people that think exactly the way you think. Whether it's in business or in life or in politics or whatever, it's easy and it's comfortable. Well, and that's why, like, social media algorithms, you click on a thing, mm-hmm. and then your feed is inundated with similar things. So now you start thinking, well, everybody thinks the way I think.
You create your own echo chamber.
Yes.
Okay, Instagram creates your echo chamber.
And echo chambers are where ideas and growth go to die. They are literal mortuaries. You cannot grow and improve in an echo chamber. You need people that are going to challenge what you know to be true.
Yes.
Because there have been plenty of things that I have absolutely known. That's why people make fun of me all the time. That's why "it depends" should be my next tattoo, because I am so reticent to attach myself to any absolutes, because life has told me that as soon as you believe something is for sure, that thing is going to whack you in the back of the head like a baseball bat.
That sounds right.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to wrap this up with a quote from Hannah Waddingham. I know her from Ted Lasso as Rebecca. Apparently, she's in Game of Thrones.
She's amazing.
Cool, great. So she, and this, the first half of this story, I feel like, has been pretty prevalent on social media, but it's the second half that I discovered is kind of interesting as well. So her drama teacher once told her whole class, "Oh, Hannah will never work on screen because she looks like one side of her face has had a stroke." And now I also looked at her face pretty heavily, and that doesn't seem to be true, but regardless. So that comment could have torn her down, but instead she used it to grow from, and she thought, come hell or high water, I will work on screen. And that worked out. So when she was nominated for an Emmy, she made a promise to herself, quote, "If this weird moment comes and I get this award and I get my foot in this door, I'm going to rip it off its hinges for theater people to follow." I felt like you would dig that,
Yep.
especially since we were blowing things up on the first episode if we had to. So she's ready to rip the hinges off the door, and so she did win that award. Her Emmy speech, I love her Emmy speech. Go check it out. We'll put links somewhere, descriptions, that sort of thing. I'll make sure you get them on our social media. But she is overcome with excitement, and she does not forget at the end of her speech to make a call for theater people and musical theater people to come on screen and open that door for them and welcome them in. So I thought that was pretty incredible of her.
Yep. I hope she thanked that teacher. Because I definitely would have.
I don't think I heard that, but I bet
she's better than that. I'm not.
Maybe she sent a letter. We don't know. Well, that's our look at understanding pain as a tool for growth. If you didn't enjoy this podcast, keep it to yourself.
We don't care. Keep it to yourself.
Stay on social media.
Nobody needs to hear from you.
Go on with your life as usual. If you did enjoy this discussion, please follow, share, subscribe to notifications. Give us a quick 5-star review, and you'll get notifications for our next episode as well. It'll really help us out. As always, thanks for listening to Wife of Violence, and we look forward to growing with you again next time.
Thanks, everybody. Peace.